My name is Emily Carter. I'm 31 years old, and I thought I knew my family. At least, I thought I did until the day we opened my father's will. Dad had always been the quiet strength in our house. He wasn't flashy, not the type of man to talk about himself much. He worked hard, an accountant by trade, but what mattered was how steady he was. If Dad said he'd be at your soccer game, he was there. If Dad promised to help with a school project, he'd stay up until midnight cutting cardboard and gluing pictures. My mother, Margaret, was different. She was all appearances. Her hair always set just right, her smile polished for neighbors, her voice sharp behind closed doors. I learned young that her love felt conditional. If you shined in public, she praised you. If you stumbled, she cut you with words sharper than glass. And then there was my sister, Claire. 2 years younger, 29, with a kind of effortless beauty that people notice when she walks into a room. Blonde hair that caught the light, blue eyes like a summer sky, and a laugh that made people lean in closer. Growing up, Claire was always the pretty one. I was the smart one. At least, that's how Mom framed it. I never questioned it. I loved Claire. Sure, sometimes I envied how easily affection came her way, but she was my sister. My best friend. The one who shared my bed during thunderstorms. The one who whispered secrets to me long after Mom and Dad thought we were asleep. So when Dad died, suddenly, a heart attack on an ordinary Tuesday, I leaned on her. We leaned on each other. The grief was sharp, unbearable at times. And when the lawyer called us in a week later, I thought it would just be about dividing assets, about making sense of the practical after the unthinkable. I didn't expect my world to crack in half. The lawyer's office smelled faintly of leather and paper, the kind of scent that clings to old books. Sunlight filtered through heavy blinds, painting stripes across the mahogany table. Mom sat stiffly in her cream blouse, pearls at her neck like armor. Claire sat beside her, her hand clasped in mine. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and began. Your father left behind some very specific instructions. My stomach nodded. I glanced at Claire. She looked calm, but her thumb tapped anxiously against my palm. Before the estate can be settled, the lawyer continued, both Emily and Claire are required to undergo DNA testing. Your father's will states this clearly. The results will determine the distribution of assets. I blinked. DNA testing? For what? The lawyer cleared his throat. Paternity. The room froze. Claire's hand slipped from mine. Mom's face went rigid, her lips pressed so tightly together they turned white. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice sharp with disbelief. The lawyer spread his hands helplessly. I can only read what's here. Your father requested confirmation that both of you are his biological children before any inheritance can proceed. I turned to Mom. Why would Dad put that in his will? She looked away, her jaw tightening. I don't know. He must have been confused, or mistrusting at the end. But something in her eyes betrayed her words. A flicker, a flash of guilt. Claire's voice trembled. Mom didn't answer. We took the tests. Swabs of the cheek, quick and clinical. I remember the sterile smell of the clinic, the way Claire's hands shook when she handed her sample to the nurse. Don't worry, I whispered. It's just a formality. Dad probably had some reason, maybe a bad experience with a client or something. She nodded, but her eyes stayed glassy, far away. We waited 2 weeks for results. 2 weeks of silence from Mom, who refused to discuss it. 2 weeks of Claire pulling away, distracted, her laugh no longer effortless. 2 weeks where my chest felt like it was full of shards of glass. And then the call came. We were back in the lawyer's office. The same mahogany table, the same slats of sunlight through the blinds. I sat rigid in my chair, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. Claire sat next to me, pale as porcelain, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Mom looked like a statue carved from marble, her pearls gleaming, her face unreadable. The lawyer opened the envelope. The results show that Emily Carter is the biological daughter of Robert Carter. Claire Carter is not. The words slammed into me like a freight train. My ears rang. My vision blurred. I turned to Claire, but she wasn't looking at me. She was staring at Mom. Is it true? Claire whispered. Her voice was so small it almost broke me. Tell me it's not true. Mom's eyes glistened, but her lips stayed pressed in that rigid line. Mom. Claire's voice cracked like glass. Say something. Silence. And in that silence I knew. Dad had known. Maybe not for years, maybe only recently, but he had known enough to put it in his will. He had known that the truth would be buried if he didn't drag it into the light. And Mom, my mother, had hidden it for 30 years. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My chest ached with grief for Dad, for the betrayal he must have felt, for the devastation Claire now carried. But beneath the grief, another emotion simmered. Rage. Not just at Mom for lying, but at the years of cruelty, the endless comparisons, the way she had shaped our identities around a lie. Claire, the favored one. Me, the one who had to work for every scrap of acknowledgement. It had all been built on sand. I pressed my palms to my eyes, hot tears spilling through my fingers. My family was gone, torn apart by a secret buried for 3 decades. And I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. The hours after the results blurred together like smeared ink on wet paper. I don't remember walking out of the lawyer's office, don't remember driving home. What I do remember is the sound of Claire's sobs echoing in the stairwell of her apartment building. The way she stumbled into her living room and collapsed onto the couch like her bones had turned to sand. I hovered near the doorway, clutching my purse strap so tightly it left dents in my hand. Claire, I whispered, but she shook her head, face buried in her hands. She knew, she choked. She knew all along. For 30 years. I sank into the chair across from her, my chest heavy. Yeah. She knew. Her shoulders shook. I thought I was Dad's little girl. He always called me that. Always. She pressed her palms against her face, tears streaming through her fingers. But I wasn't. I wasn't even his. The words carved a wound in me too. Not because of the truth itself, we couldn't control bloodlines, but because of what it meant. That everything Claire thought she knew about Dad, about herself, had been laced with lies. I leaned forward, my voice raw. He loved you, Claire. DNA doesn't change that. He raised you. He cared for you every single day. She looked up, her mascara smudged, her eyes swollen. Then why did he make us take the test? Why would he do that to me? The question pierced me. Because I had asked it too. I think, my voice faltered. I think he wanted the truth to come out. He didn't want Mom to hide it forever. Maybe he thought. Don't, she snapped, her voice cracking. Don't defend him. He could have told me when he was alive. He could have sat me down and said it to my face. Her anger was jagged, but underneath it, I recognized grief. She wasn't just mourning Dad anymore. She was mourning the story she thought was hers. Later that night, I called Mom. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice clipped. Emily. Why? My voice shook with fury. Why would you lie for 30 years? Silence. Then, because it was none of your business. My chest tightened. None of my business? I'm your daughter. She's your daughter. This was our family. You wouldn't understand, she said coldly. What happened between me and your father is not something you need to judge. I did what I had to do. What you had to do. I repeated, my voice rising. You let him raise her without telling him the truth. You let me grow up being compared to her, never knowing the foundation of that comparison was built on a lie. Her sigh was sharp, impatient. Don't be dramatic, Emily. You've always been too sensitive. The words stabbed deep. They were the same ones she'd used when I cried as a child, when I tried to stand up for myself, when I begged for her approval. This time, though, they didn't silence me. They ignited me. I'm done, Mom, I said through gritted teeth. I'm done letting you control the story. You ruined Dad's memory. You ruined Claire's sense of who she is. And you don't even care. I hung up before she could reply, my hands trembling. The next few days were a whirlwind of chaos. Relatives called, their voices sharp with curiosity. Aunt Linda wanted details. Uncle Mark muttered about family shame. It spread like wildfire, whispers twisting through the branches of the family tree. Some sympathized. Your father was a good man, one cousin said gently. No matter what the blood test says. Others weren't so kind. Well, a different cousin remarked, I always thought Claire looked a little different. Claire stopped answering calls altogether. She turned off her phone, locked her social media, and pulled into herself like a snail retreating into its shell. I went to see her one evening. She was curled under a blanket on the couch, the TV flickering soundlessly. Her eyes were red, her cheeks blotchy. Have you eaten? I asked softly. She shook her head. I went into the kitchen, microwaved some leftover pasta, and set it in front of her. She stared at it for a long time before finally whispering, I don't know who I am anymore. My chest ached. I sat beside her, pulling her into a hug. You're Claire. You're my sister. That's never going to change. Her voice cracked. But not really. Not by blood. By choice, I said firmly. By love. And that means more. She sobbed against my shoulder, and I held her tighter, wishing love could heal wounds that deep. But the cracks in our family only widened. At Dad's memorial service 2 weeks later, tension hung so thick it was suffocating. Friends and neighbors filled the church pews, offering condolences, sharing stories about Dad's steady kindness. But every glance toward our family carried an edge, like they knew something had shifted beneath the surface. Mom sat at the front, her face an unreadable mask, her black dress perfectly pressed. Claire sat beside me, her hands clenched together so tightly her knuckles were white. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium, my legs trembling. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the man's memory we were here to honor, and my throat tightened. Robert Carter was the kind of man who never broke a promise. I began, my voice quivering. He believed in honesty, in hard work, in love that was steady and unconditional. He wasn't perfect, but he was the best father I could have asked for. I glanced at Claire. Her eyes filled with tears. And I know, I added softly, that he loved us. Both of us. More than anything. My gaze flicked briefly to Mom. For the first time, her mask cracked. Her lips pressed thin, her eyes darkened, but she didn't look away. When I returned to my seat, Claire gripped my hand. For a moment, in the middle of all that grief and betrayal, we were just two sisters clinging to each other. After the service, as guests filtered out, I overheard two neighbors whispering near the door. Did you hear about the will? One murmured. Shameful, the other said, shaking her head. Imagine hiding something like that for 30 years. I turned sharply, my cheeks burning. But before I could say anything, Claire's hand tugged mine. Don't, she whispered. They'll talk no matter what. Let them. Her words were weary, but wise. And in that moment, I realized she was stronger than she believed. That night, back in my apartment, I sat with Dad's old watch in my hand. The leather band was cracked, the face scratched, but it ticked steadily, faithfully. He must have known. Maybe for years. Maybe only at the end. But he'd chosen to leave us with the truth, not the lie. He'd chosen to rip the bandage off, no matter how deep the wound. And though it hurt, though it shattered us, part of me understood. Lies rot families from the inside. Truth burns, but it also clears the ground for something new. As I lay in bed, the weight of grief heavy on my chest, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would not let Mom's lies define me. I would not let them destroy my bond with Claire. If Dad's last gift was the truth, then I owed it to him, and to myself, to honor it. Even if it meant facing the fire head-on. The days after Dad's memorial blurred together, but the anger inside me sharpened. I couldn't stop replaying Mom's coldness, her refusal to own what she had done. It wasn't just that she'd lied. It was that she acted as though her lie was nothing, as though the decades of damage it caused were ours to simply swallow. One evening, I drove to her house. The house I grew up in. The house that had once felt like home but now seemed like a museum of betrayals. The front lawn was trimmed perfectly, the porch light glowing warmly. But as I walked up the steps, my stomach twisted. Mom opened the door before I could knock. She looked immaculate as always. A cream cardigan over a pressed blouse, pearls gleaming at her throat. Not a single strand of hair out of place. "Emily," she said coolly, stepping aside. "Come in." I hesitated, then entered. The house smelled of lavender polish and lemon cleaner, just like always. The family photos lined the hallway. Dad's smile frozen in frames, Claire and me in school portraits, family vacations captured in glossy 5x7s. Looking at them now felt wrong, like staring at counterfeit currency. We sat across from each other in the living room. Mom perched on the edge of her chair, spine perfectly straight, while I sank into the couch, my arms crossed. "I suppose you're here to yell at me again," she said, her tone icy. "No," I said sharply. "I'm here for answers. Real ones. Not excuses." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Who is Claire's father?" I demanded. She blinked, her mask cracking slightly. "That doesn't matter." "It matters to her," I shot back. "It matters to me. Dad deserved to know. We deserve to know." Her hand trembled slightly as she smoothed her cardigan. "It was the mistake. I was young. Your father was working long hours. I was lonely." The words made my stomach churn. "You cheated," I said flatly. She flinched. "It was one time that turned into a lifetime of lies," I snapped. "Did Dad know? Did he find out back then?" Her eyes flickered, betraying her. "He suspected, but he chose not to press. He loved Claire. He didn't want to break the family apart." My chest ached. Dad had carried this suspicion for years, maybe decades, and still chose love. Still chose us. "Why didn't you tell him the truth?" I asked, my voice trembling. Her gaze hardened. "Because I knew if I admitted it, everything would collapse. And I was right. Look at us now. You're tearing this family apart with your judgment." My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "No. You tore this family apart 30 years ago, and you've been hiding the wreckage ever since." For the first time, her mask cracked fully. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, her voice trembling. "Do you think I haven't hated myself every day? Do you think I don't wake up at night wondering what would happen if I'd just told the truth?" I stared at her, stunned. "Then why didn't you ever say something? To Claire? To me?" She looked down, her hands gripping the armrests like lifelines. "Because I was afraid you'd never forgive me." The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, I stood. "You were right. I don't forgive you." Her breath hitched, but I didn't look back as I walked out the door. When I got to my car, I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, shaking with adrenaline. I thought the confrontation would give me relief. Instead, it left me hollow, raw. I drove straight to Claire's apartment. She opened the door in sweatpants and a messy bun, her eyes red from crying. I stepped inside, my voice thick. "I went to see Mom." Her shoulders tensed. "And," she admitted it, "she cheated. Said it was one time, but it doesn't matter." She knew. Dad suspected, but he stayed anyway. Claire's face crumpled. She sank onto the couch, clutching a pillow to her chest. "So he raised me, knowing I might not be his. He still called me his little girl." I sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Because you were. In every way that mattered. You were his daughter." Her tears spilled over. "I feel like my whole life is a lie. Who am I, Emily? Who am I if I'm not his?" My throat tightened. "You're Claire. You're my sister. That's who you are. That's who you'll always be." She sobbed into my shoulder, and I held her, my own tears soaking into her hair. The weeks that followed were brutal. Claire tried to track down answers about her biological father. Mom stonewalled her, refusing to reveal his name. "It was a mistake," she kept repeating. "He doesn't matter." But to Claire he did. He mattered because half of her identity was a blank space. I watched her unravel under the weight of not knowing. She stopped going out with friends, stopped working on her art projects. Her apartment grew cluttered, dishes piling up, clothes scattered across the floor. One night, I found her sitting on the floor of her bedroom, staring at an old photo of Dad holding her as a baby. "He looks so proud," she whispered. Did he look at me and see a lie? I knelt beside her, gripping her hand.
No.
He looked at you and saw his daughter. That's all he ever saw. Her eyes filled with tears. Then why did he put it in his will? Why couldn't he just let me believe? I didn't know how to answer. Maybe Dad had wanted her to know the truth, to have the choice to define herself honestly. Or maybe he'd wanted to punish Mom for decades of betrayal. I'd never know. But I did know this. Truth hurt. Yet lies poisoned. And Dad had chosen truth, even if it shattered us. Meanwhile, the whispers in the family grew louder. At Sunday dinner, Aunt Linda cornered me in the kitchen. "Is it true?" she demanded. "About Claire?" I froze. "It's none of your business." She scoffed. "Family secrets always come out. Better to face them than pretend." Her words made my skin crawl. That was the problem. We hadn't faced them soon enough. When I returned to the table, Claire's chair was empty. I found her outside, leaning against the porch railing, her face streaked with tears. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't sit there while they all look at me like I'm not one of them." I pulled her into a hug. "Then don't. You don't owe them anything. You don't even owe Mom anything." She clung to me, her voice breaking. "I just want to know who I am." And in that moment, I realized, if Mom wasn't going to tell us the truth, then maybe we had to find it ourselves. That night, lying awake in bed, the thought burned in my mind. Maybe it was time to dig deeper. To uncover the secrets Mom refused to share. Because Claire deserved answers. And I wasn't going to let her carry the weight of a 30-year lie alone. I don't think either of us said it out loud that night, but a silent agreement formed between Claire and me. If Mom wasn't going to give us the truth, we would find it ourselves. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, staring at Dad's old photo albums. He had kept everything: vacation photos, Christmas mornings, birthdays. I flipped through page after page, searching for something, anything, that might hint at who Mom had been involved with. Claire came over, her hair still damp from the shower, her eyes heavy from lack of sleep. She sat across from me, scanning the photos. "Do you think it's someone we know?" she asked softly. The question made my skin prickle. What if it was? What if the man who fathered my sister had been around us all along, at family barbecues, holiday gatherings, school plays? "I don't know," I admitted. "But Mom said it was one time." If that's true, maybe it was someone who just passed through her life. Claire frowned, tapping a photo. "Look, this was taken the summer before I was born." "Who's that?" I leaned closer. The picture was of a 4th of July cookout in our backyard. Dad stood at the grill, wearing his Kiss the Cook apron, smiling like he always did. Beside Mom was a man I didn't recognize, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a crooked smile. His hand rested casually on the back of Mom's chair. "I don't remember him," I whispered. Claire's face paled. What if that's him? The thought hit me like a jolt. Could it be that simple? We searched for other photos. Sure enough, the same man appeared in 2 more, once at a picnic, once at a neighborhood block party. And then nothing. No more photos after that summer. "Do you think Dad knew?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. My chest tightened. If he did, he never let it show. The discovery lit a fire in Claire. For the first time since the DNA results, she had something to cling to, a lead, however fragile. She insisted we try to find out who the man was. So we started asking questions. Quietly at first, careful not to alert Mom. We visited Aunt Linda, who loved nothing more than gossip over coffee. I slid the photo across her kitchen table. "Do you know who this is?" Aunt Linda squinted, adjusting her glasses. "Well, I'll be. That's Thomas Miller. He lived a few streets over. Worked in construction, if I remember right. Charming fellow. Always had a joke ready. But he moved away. Oh, must have been 3 decades ago." My pulse quickened. "Do you know where?" She shrugged. "No idea. But I do know your mother, and he wrote friendly. The way she said friendly made my stomach twist. When we left Aunt Linda's, Claire's hands shook on the steering wheel. So it's him. It has to be. Maybe, I said cautiously. We don't know for sure. Her eyes brimmed with determination. Then we find out. The next week became a blur of internet searches, phone calls, and old address records. We finally tracked down a lead. Thomas Miller had moved to Arizona in the late 90s. A quick search showed a current address in Phoenix. Claire's hands trembled as she stared at the screen. Do I reach out? I studied her. Do you want to? Her lips parted, then closed again. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't know. What if he doesn't want me? What if he denies everything? What if he never even knew? I reached across the table, taking her hand. Then at least you'll have tried. At least you'll know the truth, no matter what it is. She swallowed hard, nodding. That night, she drafted a letter. Simple. Direct. She explained who she was, that she had reason to believe he might be her biological father, and that she wasn't asking for money or anything, just clarity. Just the truth. She slipped it into an envelope with shaking hands, and we mailed it together. Then came the waiting. Days crawled by like months. Claire jumped every time her phone buzzed, checked the mailbox 3 times a day. Her anxiety seeped into me too. I dreamed of Dad at night, dreamed of him holding out his hand, his eyes filled with sorrow. And then, one Thursday afternoon, Claire called me, her voice trembling. Emily. He wrote back. I rushed to her apartment, my heart pounding. She sat at the table, the envelope open in front of her. Her hands shook as she held the letter. Read it, I urged. She unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the words. Her breath hitched. It's him, she whispered. He says he remembers Mom. Says he never knew about me. Says if I want, he's willing to meet. Her tears spilled onto the page. I wrapped my arms around her as she cried, my own throat tight. Part of me was angry. Angry at Mom for keeping this from him, for keeping this from Claire. Another part of me was terrified. What if meeting him broke her even more? But I also saw something in her I hadn't seen since before Dad's death. Hope. When we finally told Mom what we discovered, her reaction was volcanic. You had no right, she snapped, her face flushed with fury. Digging into my past, involving strangers. Do you realize what you've done? Claire's voice trembled, but her eyes blazed. What you did was lie to me for 30 years. You stole my right to know who I am. Mom's lip curled. I was protecting you. From what? Claire shouted, her voice cracking. From the truth? From myself? From knowing the man who gave me half my DNA? You weren't protecting me. You were protecting yourself. The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Mom's face hardened. If you go to him, don't bother coming back here. The silence that followed was deafening. Claire straightened her shoulders. For the first time, she looked at Mom not as a daughter begging for approval, but as a woman choosing her own path. Then I guess I won't, she said quietly. That night, she called Thomas. I sat beside her, holding her hand as the phone rang. A man's voice answered, deep and steady. Hello. Claire's breath caught. Hi, this is Claire. Claire Carter. Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. I think you might be my father. The pause on the other end stretched so long, I thought the line had gone dead. Then, softly, he said, I've been waiting for this call. Claire broke into sobs, and I held her as relief. Grief and fear crashed over us in waves. For the first time, she wasn't just chasing shadows. She was facing the truth. And though it terrified both of us, I knew this was the beginning of a new chapter, one Mom could never control again. The day Claire arranged to meet Thomas, the air around us felt charged, heavy with nerves. She invited me to come with her, but I hesitated. Are you sure you want me there? I asked gently. Her eyes widened, a mixture of fear and relief flickering across her face. Please. I don't think I can do this alone. So we booked flights to Phoenix, Arizona. The whole trip felt surreal. Boarding a plane, clutching the letter that had opened this door, rehearsing questions Claire might ask. Every mile we flew felt like we were peeling away from the life we thought we knew. When we landed, Claire's hands trembled as we rode in a cab to a small cafe Thomas had suggested. The desert sun was blinding outside, but inside my chest, everything was dark with anticipation. The cafe was modest, its windows shaded with blinds that kept the room cool. And there he was, sitting at a corner table, a man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and tired blue eyes. When he saw Claire, he stood immediately. The resemblance hit me like a wave. Claire's cheekbones, the slope of her nose, even the way her lips curved when she hesitated, they were his. She froze in the doorway. For a moment, she looked like a child again, wide-eyed and scared. Then she took a shaky breath and stepped forward. "Hi," she whispered. He gave her a small, tentative smile. "Hi." His voice cracked, low and rough. "Claire." The sound of her name on his lips made her tears spill. She sank into the chair across from him, and I slid into the seat beside her, trying to give them space, but also be her anchor. Thomas's hands trembled as he folded them on the table. "I never knew." "If I had," his voice broke. He cleared his throat. "If I had known, I would have been there. I would have fought to be in your life." Claire wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "Did you love her?" "My mom." The question hung heavy. He sighed, his eyes clouding with memory. "It wasn't love. Not the way it should have been. It was a mistake. I was young, reckless. She was lonely. We crossed a line. And then nothing. I never heard from her again." Claire flinched, her hands twisting in her lap. "So, I was a mistake." His eyes widened, horrified. "No. God, no. You weren't the mistake. What we did was. You're a gift I didn't even know I had." Her breath hitched, her chin quivering. "Do you really mean that?" He leaned forward, his voice steady. "Look at me, Claire. I lost 30 years of your life. I won't pretend I deserve anything from you now. But I want you to know, I want to know you. If you'll let me." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak. I felt my own throat tighten, watching the rawness of it, the broken pieces of two lives trying to fit together. The next few days in Phoenix were a blur of tentative steps toward connection. Thomas took us to his home, a modest ranch-style house with a tidy garden out front. He introduced us to his wife, Linda, a kind-eyed woman who looked startled at first, but quickly offered Claire a hug. "I've always wanted children," Linda said softly. "I guess I finally have a stepdaughter." The warmth of it cracked something in Claire, who cried in Linda's arms like she'd found a piece of herself she didn't know was missing. We spent hours talking about Claire's childhood, about Dad, about the years Thomas had spent wondering what his life might have been if he'd made different choices. There was no easy way to bridge 3 lost decades, but there was a start. One evening, as Claire and Thomas sat on the porch, I excused myself to the backyard, giving them space. But I overheard her say, "I loved the man I thought was my dad. Robert Carter. He raised me. He gave me everything. But now I feel like I'm betraying him by being here." Thomas's voice was quiet but firm. "You're not betraying him. He loved you as his own, and nothing changes that. If anything, this proves how strong his love was, that it went beyond blood." Her sobs followed, muffled in the desert air. And for the first time, I let myself cry too. When we flew home, something in Claire was different. She carried herself straighter, her eyes no longer completely hollow. But there was still weight on her shoulders. Mom called the moment we landed. Claire put her on speaker, her jaw tight. "I heard you went to Arizona." Mom's voice snapped through the phone. "I told you not to." Claire's voice was steady, though her hands trembled. "I met him, Mom. I met my father. And he wants to be part of my life." Mom's sharp intake of breath crackled on the line. "Don't you dare. Don't bring that man into this family. He ruined everything once, he'll ruin it again." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but her voice didn't waver. "No, Mom. You ruined everything. With your lies. Not him. Not me. You." There was silence on the other end. Then a sharp click, the call ended. Claire's tears spilled over, but her chin lifted. I don't need her permission anymore, she whispered. I pulled her into my arms. You never did. The fallout spread quickly. Word traveled through the family that Claire had found Thomas. Some called her brave. Others whispered that she was stirring up old shame. At Sunday dinner, Uncle Mark muttered, "She's chasing something that should have stayed buried." I slammed my fork down. What should have stayed buried was the lie. Don't you dare blame her for wanting the truth. The table fell silent. For once, no one challenged me. That night, Claire confessed something that nearly broke me. I used to pray at night, she whispered, sitting cross-legged on my couch. I used to pray that Mom would look at me the way she looked at you sometimes. Like I mattered. And now I wonder if she didn't love me because I reminded her of what she did. Her voice cracked, and I reached for her hand. You matter, Claire. You've always mattered. Don't you ever let her lies convince you otherwise. She squeezed my hand, her tears glistening. In that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't just about Claire's search for identity. It was about survival. About both of us breaking free from the prison of Mom's manipulation. And I knew then that this was only the beginning. Because Mom wasn't finished fighting for control. And neither were we finished breaking free. I should have known Mom wouldn't let things rest. She never surrendered control easily. And when she felt it slipping, she always clawed harder. 2 weeks after Claire and I returned from Phoenix, the calls started. Not to us, she didn't dare, but to relatives. To friends. To anyone who'd listen. She's ungrateful, she told Aunt Linda, who immediately relayed it to me in a hushed, guilty tone. After everything I did for her, she spits in my face and goes chasing a stranger. She's tearing this family apart, she told Uncle Mark. Robert would be ashamed of her. She's poisoning Emily too, she whispered to a neighbor, turning her against her own mother. By the time Sunday rolled around, the whispers had hardened into judgmental stares. Claire and I walked into the family dinner to a room so quiet you could hear the clink of silverware. Uncle Mark coughed into his napkin. Aunt Linda wouldn't meet our eyes. Even the cousins, usually glued to their phones, looked at us with a mixture of pity and curiosity. Claire's hand tightened around mine, under the table. Mom sat at the head, pearls gleaming, her smile razor-sharp. I'm so glad you could both make it, she said sweetly. It's important we stay united, even in difficult times. The hypocrisy made my stomach churn. Halfway through the meal, she set down her fork and looked directly at Claire. So, she said loudly, how's your real father? The table froze. Claire's face drained of color. Her fork slipped from her hand, clattering against the plate. Don't, she whispered. Mom tilted her head. What? I think the family deserves to know. Don't you, Emily? I slammed my napkin down. Enough. Her eyes narrowed. Excuse me? You don't get to humiliate her, I snapped. Not anymore. You lied for 30 years, Mom. You don't get to sit here and act like the victim. Gasps rippled around the table. Aunt Linda muttered something under her breath. Mom's mask cracked, her smile faltering. I did what I had to do to protect this family. Protect. I nearly laughed, bitter and sharp. You didn't protect us. You protected yourself. You destroyed Dad's trust. You shattered Claire's identity. And now you're trying to turn everyone against her because you can't stand losing control. Her face flushed scarlet. You don't understand. No. I cut in, my voice shaking but firm. I understand perfectly. And I'm done. Done with your manipulation, your lies, your cruelty. The silence that followed was deafening. Claire's hand shook in mine, but for the first time, her chin lifted. Her eyes, wet with tears, locked on Mom. You may have given birth to me, she whispered, but you don't get to define me anymore. She pushed back her chair and stood. I followed. Together, we walked out of that dining room, leaving Mom sputtering behind us. That night, Claire came over to my apartment. She collapsed onto my couch, her hands trembling, her breath ragged. I don't know if I can do this anymore, she whispered. The whispers, the stares, Mom's venom, it's too much. I sat beside her, pulling her into my arms. You can. Because you're stronger than you think. And because you're not alone. You have me. You have Thomas. You even have Linda. You're not powerless anymore. Her tears soaked into my shirt, but her breathing steadied. I keep thinking about Dad, she said softly. How he must have known. How he must have carried that weight all those years.
And he still loved me.
Do you think he'd be proud of me now? My throat tightened. I know he would. Because you're brave enough to face the truth. Because you're not letting Mom win. The next morning, Claire made a decision. I'm going to tell them, she said firmly. Everyone. The whole story. No more whispers. No more shame. If Mom wants to play this game, fine. But the truth is mine to tell, not hers. She asked me to stand with her. So that weekend, we called a family meeting at my apartment. When everyone arrived, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Mom swept in last, her smile smug, as if she'd already won. Claire stood in the center of the room, her voice trembling but strong. For 30 years, I lived a lie. I thought Robert Carter was my father. He raised me, he loved me, and in every way that matters, he was. But my DNA test proved otherwise. My mother hid the truth, that my biological father is Thomas Miller. She lied to Dad. She lied to me. She lied to all of you. Gasps filled the room. Whispers erupted. Claire's eyes brimmed with tears, but she didn't falter. I am not ashamed. I am not broken. I am not less because of the truth. I am Claire, and I deserve to know who I am. The room fell silent. Mom's face hardened, her jaw tight. You're humiliating yourself, she spat. No, Claire said, her voice steady. I'm freeing myself. After that day, things shifted. Some relatives rallied around Claire. Aunt Linda hugged her tightly, whispering, You're brave, sweetheart. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Others pulled away, too uncomfortable to face the mess. Uncle Mark muttered something about family shame and left early. And Mom? She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. She hasn't spoken to us since. But for the first time in months, Claire slept through the night. For the first time, she woke up and smiled without forcing it. One evening, weeks later, Claire and I sat on my balcony, sipping wine as the city lights twinkled below us. I feel lighter, she admitted. Like I've been carrying a boulder on my back my whole life, and it finally fell off. I smiled, my heart swelling. That's because you told the truth. You took your power back. She leaned her head on my shoulder, her voice soft. Thank you for not letting me face this alone. I squeezed her hand. Always. Mom's silence still hurt. Part of me wondered if she would ever apologize, if she even could. Another part of me realized it didn't matter anymore. Because Claire and I weren't defined by her lies.
We weren't bound by her shame.
We had built something new, something stronger, on the ruins she left behind. And in that quiet moment, under the stars, I realized that sometimes the worst betrayals don't destroy you. Sometimes they set you free. The final piece of closure came on a crisp autumn afternoon, months after everything had unraveled. Claire and I stood together in the cemetery, fallen leaves crunching beneath our shoes, the air cool but gentle. We were there to visit Dad. His gravestone was simple, just like him. Robert Carter, beloved husband and father, 1959 to 2023. Fresh flowers had been left by someone earlier that week. I bent down to brush away a few stray leaves, my throat tight. Claire stood beside me, her hands trembling slightly as she placed a small framed photo against the stone, one of Dad holding her as a baby, his eyes shining with pride. I used to wonder if you saw me and thought of betrayal, she whispered, her voice shaking. But now I think you just saw your daughter. Because that's what you made me. And I'll carry that forever. Her tears fell onto the grass, and I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. I spoke softly, my eyes fixed on his name. You carried the truth, Dad. And even though it hurt, even though it broke us open, you gave us the chance to live honestly. You loved us both, and I'll make sure that love doesn't get lost in all of this. We stood there in silence, the weight of grief mixed with something lighter, acceptance. After the visit, Claire and I met Thomas and his wife, Linda, for dinner at a small Italian restaurant near the airport. It was still awkward at times, like fitting together puzzle pieces that had been bent, but there was kindness in the way Thomas looked at her. "Your laugh," he said suddenly, chuckling softly. "It's mine. I never noticed until now." Claire blushed, covering her mouth. For the first time in months, her smile looked natural, effortless. Later that evening, she pulled me aside. "I think I want him in my life. Not as a replacement for Dad. He'll never be replaced, but as someone new. As part of who I am." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "You deserve that. You deserve to know every part of yourself." Mom never came around. She sent no apologies, no explanations. She cut herself off completely, as though silence could erase what had happened. At first, the absence felt like another wound. But over time, it became clear. Sometimes distance is the only protection you get from people who refuse to change. Claire grieved that loss too, but she didn't let it consume her. She built bridges instead, with Thomas, with Linda, with friends who had stuck by her side when the whispers grew cruel. And with me. Especially with me. Our bond deepened in ways I hadn't expected. We talked late into the night, shared secrets we'd never spoken aloud, laughed over childhood memories with a new clarity. It was as though tearing down Mom's lies had rebuilt us stronger. Months later, Claire hosted a small art show at a local gallery. She'd thrown herself back into painting, her work raw and beautiful, full of swirling colors and fractured shapes that somehow came together as something whole. I stood in the corner, watching as she spoke to guests, her voice confident, her eyes bright. One canvas caught my breath. It was of two figures, one holding the other's hand as they stood on the edge of a crumbling house. In the distance, a new foundation was rising. When I asked her about it, she smiled through tears. "It's us. Leaving behind what's broken and building something new." On the drive home that night, I thought about everything we'd endured. About Dad's will, about the DNA test, about the truth Mom had hidden like a ticking bomb. It had destroyed something, but it had also revealed something stronger. I realized betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. Sometimes, it's the start of a different one you write yourself. The last time Claire and I visited Dad's grave together, we brought candles. We lit them at dusk, the flames flickering against the cool night air. She whispered, "I'm okay now, Dad. I miss you every day, but I'm okay." And I whispered, "We're okay, Dad, because you gave us the truth, and we finally know how to carry it." The candles burned low, glowing in the dark like quiet promises. We walked away hand in hand, not broken daughters, not victims of lies, but sisters. Stronger than ever, bound not by blood, but by love, by truth, by the choice to keep standing. And in that moment, for the first time since everything began, I could finally breathe.